Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome. I'm Shazia joining you on the Nutrition Show on Unity FM 93.5 FM. I'm really excited to have you all join me for a discussion on topics related to nutrition, which may support better health and well-being. So before I dive into the topic of the day, I want to remind listeners that all information shared on the show is general in nature. So what this means is anyone with any medical issue or concern, please ensure to speak to your own medical practitioner for advice at your earliest opportunity. Today's topic then is about the benefits of fasting. So not just in Ramadan, I know we're still in Ramadan and we've approached the last 10 days, which is absolutely amazing, but benefits that can be realized beyond Ramadan. We don't actually stop benefiting once Ramadan is complete, but what we can do is take the good that we experience, the good habits that we've actually gained, the bad habits that we've stopped, and carry them over to our next Ramadan effectively, making ourselves better each day, day by day. However small those improvements may be, we need to carry those forward. It's always a case of looking at ourselves and improving ourselves, comparing only to ourselves as individuals. So you don't need to look at the person next door or the person that's doing endless worship. You just need to look at yourself and think, okay, what can I do to carry myself forward now that these 30 days are up? And how am I going to do that? So whether it's a case of you having to write it down on a notepad, to make a schedule for yourself, schedule it in as you would do your work, as you would do your other tasks that you've got planned, your learning, your children's activities, whatever it may be. I think it's one of those things that you really do need to schedule, because as they say, if you plan it in, you'll get it done. If you don't, you'll just forget about it. So remember, Ramadan is training ground. It's to make ourselves better than the year before, so we reflect on ourselves. And it's about creating new positive habits. Remember, 30 days is about right to create a new habit. And we can actually take this on board and carry them forward, and at the same time lose the bad habits that we may have accumulated in the year before. So being 2/3 of the way through Ramadan, you're probably like me again, wondering how fast the month has gone by and wondering how much have I actually achieved. And that's easily done because we're human. We know that, it gets difficult and life gets in the way. If you've been poorly, like I have, unfortunately, you kind of lose that motivation despite trying your best to get whatever you can done. But you're probably feeling, I need to hold on real tight to each day and try and make the most of it while being dragged down by all these other things going on. I want to remind you, and it's a reminder for myself first and foremost, that it's how we finish the race that matters. So it's the final sprint. Get your head down, plan what you need to do, and do your best. And, rest assured that Allah will always look at our deeds by our intention. So if we intended to have a good Ramadan from the outset, we'll be rewarded accordingly. And just give it your best shot. You don't want to make yourself unwell. You don't want to make yourself feel unmotivated, particularly not in these last 10 nights. And just set yourself that goal, however small it may be. And just give it your best shot. Remember, it's the last sprint. You want to do your best and you want to get there, hoping for Allah's reward and forgiveness and the mercy and the blessing that comes thereafter. So before I get into today's topic on the benefits of fasting, I would like to emphasize that this is a discussion for information purposes only, so it does not constitute medical advice. And it's important for me to say this because we're on a health show. Anyone listening with any related health concern or issue, please speak to your own medical practitioner at the earliest opportunity. Of course, your personal safety and well-being during your spiritual journey is our primary concern. So I'm sure that you may have already listened to and experienced the amazing blessings of Ramadan so far. It's a month of blessings and everyone is sure to benefit in some way or another, however little we may do. It's just it's that month of expanse, I believe, and every little that you do, it comes back to you manyfold in return. I'm not going to go into any great detail on the benefits of fasting in Ramadan from an Islamic perspective, because I'm sure that you would have already heard the amazing scholars and people of knowledge speak about this already, and they're doing an amazing job. May Allah bless them. But I just want to highlight some of the keys for the month just to open the show. And then I want to talk about the additional benefits that fasting can bring. So this is from very much a secondary perspective if you're looking at Ramadan. And then it's an ongoing perspective if you're going to fast outside Ramadan, which is an amazing tool to use to help support your health and well-being. So in terms of the Ramadan fasting, essentially we're partaking in this act of worship because it brings us close to Allah, brings us close to God. So it's a part of our belief, it's a part of our worship. And fasting in Ramadan is God's command to us, as we learn from the Quranic verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 183, that's the second surah, which may be interpreted as, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed upon you as it was prescribed upon those before you, so that perhaps you may become mindful of Allah. So you may become God conscious, and the word that is used, which has multiple meanings, and I could certainly not do any justice for, is the word taqwa. So that's the reason why we fast. It's clear in the Quran. It's something that's been prescribed upon us. It's about us taking time to reflect on our purpose, why we're here. The reason for, why we call ourselves Muslims as a fifth of the reason anyway. It's something that, we benefit from immensely. And, we see the love and the connection, the charitable nature of people in this month. So, there's so much to be had and said for the month alone from a spiritual perspective. But we can see the root of this is that we're there to worship Allah. So we know fasting is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So alongside the Shahada, which is a testimony of faith and believing in the Prophet, peace be upon him, as the last messenger and slave of Allah, in addition to our 5 daily prayers, the compulsory charity, which is zakah, and also the pilgrimage to Mecca once in our lifetime, also known as the Hajj. Another benefit is that in Ramadan we find the night of power. So we'll be seeking that since we're entering the last third of Ramadan now. And this is one of the greatest nights of worship. And for the one who seeks and is able to find the night of worship in the last 10 nights, it is though he has dedicated his worship to Allah for 1,000 months. So that's equivalent to more than 83 years of a lifetime's worth of worship. So these are some of the amazing benefits of Ramadan alone. There are many more, and as I say, I cannot give it justice to go into the details of this, but I'm sure you'll be able to locate this information online if you want to know more. So what I want to talk more about for the rest of the time that I have with you today is about the other benefits that fasting serves. These may also be experienced by Muslims and others who fast during Ramadan, and you can see them very much as additional benefits. So a secondary benefit, if you like, because we have the primary benefits and they come from the reasons why we need to fast. And then these are kind of secondary that we find alongside of the initial benefits. And these are more likely to be experienced by those people who are especially mindful of their food and lifestyle choices in Ramadan. So Ramadan isn't an excuse to become lazy. In fact, we have to up our game in this month because it's at the time that we need to shine as Muslims, not only for our own self-development and our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also with our connection with the community, with people on a wider level, with the non-Muslims as well. Character is just something that is just, you can't state its importance enough. And being of good character, being merciful, being loving, understanding, forbearing, all of these things are just so much more essential in this month. Caring for the community, not creating problems for the community. I've seen on the front page of a newspaper lately about the problems that are being caused in communities due to Ramadan iftar time, and I was quite sad to see this because it's exactly the reputation that we're not supposed to be creating for ourselves. because this is not what we're prescribed to be doing. We're supposed to be mindful, not just of ourselves, but our neighbours, our communities. We seek to cause no harm at any other time of the year, and it's so much more imperative at this time of the year. So please, for all those who are listening and can advise family members, friends, and I'm sure they're not doing this out of any particular sort of malice, please be mindful of others at this important time of the year. Be supportive, be caring, be helpful, because these are the characters that we are supposed to be imparting in the community every day of our lives. And this is what the Prophet, peace be upon him, showed us through his beautiful character. So what is fasting then? Before I go into the health benefits from a fasting perspective, I just want to go back to the definition of fasting. So this is not now the definition that we are familiar with from the Islamic point of view, although it forms part of it. But fasting is defined as the abstinence from all or some foods or drinks for a given period of time. And there are several types of fasting. Most of these are performed over a period of 1 to 3 days, but there is a variation and there are exceptions to this rule. So examples of fasting include intermittent fasting and time-restricted feeding. So you may be familiar with these terms, but there are others too. There are also specific diets that will incorporate an element of fasting within them. So people will follow a particular diet and then they will go food and water or beverage free for certain periods of time to fit in with that model of diet that they're following. Before I go any further, I want to stress that fasting may not be suitable for everyone, and I would always advise seeking professional advice before starting out to ensure that A, you ascertain the best fasting type for your body to allow you to benefit and reap the rewards, health rewards, from the actual process, and B, that you do not cause your body and your health any adverse effect. So the whole point is that you're getting yourself to a better place from a health and well-being perspective, not causing yourself any harm. Those on multiple medicines or those with chronic health conditions may be particularly vulnerable to difficulties with fasting. So again, you would be in that group to seek medical advice before embarking on this particular tool for improving your health and well-being. Furthermore, people falling into special groups like the elderly, pregnant women, nursing mums, and children will all require specialist input as they may be unsuitable candidates for fasting. I would always advise to work with a qualified and registered healthcare professional, and it always pays off to speak to your general practitioner as well, because even in my work as a nutritional therapist, I will work with general practitioners and other multidisciplinary care team members when I work with a client, because it's about joining forces, if you like, to get the best for the client that you have in front of you. It's never about working against someone else. It doesn't work. It doesn't leave a good reputation for myself as a nutritional therapist, and it leaves the patient or the client even more confused than they were to begin with. So for those that can fast, there is ample information out there about the benefits of fasting. And what I want to do before I go into talking about these is I want to briefly highlight how easy it is to suffer poor health. And what's the reason behind this? Well, when we look at our current way of living, we're blessed with ample food. Everywhere we look, there are options for food, whether that be the supermarket, a local corner shop, your petrol station, a drugstore that you go to, or your pharmacy. Everywhere you go, there is food of some sort, whether that be fruit and veg, whether that be snacks, whether that be nuts, whether that be anything of any sort. You can actually get your hands on without any problem whatsoever. It's so convenient, it's so accessible, and oftentimes actually our problems are actually coming from the fact that we're overeating rather than undereating. So if you look at the problems of the Western world compared to the developing world, you can see that the differences here are quite stark, in that you can actually put a lot of these issues down to the fact that we overeat. And this is where fasting can become an amazing tool to get us realigned and back on track with our health. We're constantly eating, even when we're not hungry. I'm guilty of it. So, I'm not pointing fingers here, but we do it all the time. And after Ramadan, it's, we've done it. And, when Ramadan comes and you haven't been fasting the whole year, or you've not been in the routine, it does come as a shock. And, we think back to how we were kind of getting through our day prior to Ramadan starting. And, it really is an amazing reflection to have. It's interesting to know also that we can actually confuse hunger with thirst. So the two brain centers that control hunger and thirst are actually very close by to one another, structurally in the brain. So we could actually be eating when we're thirsty. So, it's something to kind of be mindful of. And, maybe reach out for some purified, filtered water instead when you're kind of, you're tempted to get a bag of crisps or, a packet of sweets or something, because your body's telling you, so you think that you're hungry. So if we're constantly feeding our body, so we're doing 3 meals a day, we're snacking in between, we're munching on things in between that as well, we're overloading our digestive system. Now, our digestive system is amazing. If you've studied digestion at school, I know I taught it at Key Stage 3 and 4, when I was teaching GCSE level science. You'll be amazed at how the digestive system works. And if you do ever get a chance, I would actually watch just a very basic video on digestion, just to get yourself knowing about what our body is doing every time we're opening our mouth to put some food into our body. It's such a huge task that we are expecting our body to undertake, and then effectively, and expecting to be well afterwards, that we kind of take it for granted oftentimes. So, on YouTube, pop onto there, find yourself a video and just watch that, even with your kids. If you're teaching them some science, it's such an amazing topic to look into, because you'll understand a lot more about what goes on in your body and what can go wrong. So if we're always eating, what's happening to our body in terms of its cleaning function? So in between meals, our body goes through a cleaning function, very much like having a cleaner in a block of offices. When everyone's done their work, they've gone home, the cleaner's out there picking up all the rubbish off the floor. Maybe if it's one of those offices, they're vacuuming, they're cleaning up after the staff have left. And this is important so that, for the following day, there's a clean environment for the people to work. I'm not saying litter your place of work, please, people, and be mindful again of the cleaner. But what I'm saying is that, like we have cleaning facilities in our day-to-day life, that is actually going on in our body as well. So if we're continuously feeding ourselves, what's happening to this cleaning function? What's happening to this kind of realignment, if you like, before the next meal is due? It's probably not happening, or if it's happening, it's not happening well enough. So, if you think about leaving rubbish lying around in a place, it's kind of a recipe for trouble. So, in my work as a nutritional therapist, this is one of the key things that I look at, to see that someone's digestive system is working effectively, not just to break down and absorb nutrients, but also to have this cleaning feature in place effectively, because I want people to be absorbing but then cleaning themselves out well enough as well. So if this cleaning isn't happening, we're going to be setting ourselves up for problems. So at night, when we're not eating, when we're sleeping, this is exactly what our body is doing. It's time for healing, resting and repairing. And thankfully, when we're sleeping a good routine, so we're sleeping enough hours, this is what the body is doing. And it's one of the reasons why sleep is so essential. Most of us don't get enough sleep. 8 hours is the kind of average recommended number of hours that we need to try and get every night. I mean, with Ramadan, in full swing at the moment, I can understand that that's something that won't be happening. And this is where napping during the day is an amazing way to kind of make up for lost hours where and when you can. Sharing that routine, obviously, with your partner if you've got a family to look after. But, napping can be incredibly beneficial in terms of making up hours of lost sleep. So if we're not getting this kind of balance right, so we're not sleeping enough, we're not giving our bodies that kind of empty space to kind of clean itself out, we're going to suffer ill effects. And this is where fasting can be an amazing tool to kind of give us that kind of break that we need, that kind of that kind of resetting of our body, to give us the opportunity to heal, to repair, to get ourselves back into the health where it should actually be going. So one of the things that fasting can can do for you, if you're able to fast, as I mentioned, it's something that you don't want to take too lightly, is that it can support blood sugar control. And how it does this is by reducing a condition or a phenomenon known as insulin resistance. Now, from a previous episode, I talked about blood sugar control in Ramadan because it's something that can be easily overlooked. And, essentially, what we need to do is to avoid the spikes in blood sugar that happen every time that we load our body with a meal, particularly carbohydrate-based meals. So, what I kind of summarized and spoke about was the hormone insulin, which is released in response to a carbohydrate meal in particular, to bring down the blood sugar, the blood glucose levels, as they start to increase following the digestion and absorption of a carbohydrate meal. Now, our body likes to maintain what we call, in scientific terms, homeostasis. And what that means is that a lot of processes in our body are controlled within a certain range, and that applies to blood sugar levels, because blood sugar shouldn't be too high and it should be too low. It should be within a particular range. So when we spike our blood sugar levels after a meal, insulin is released to bring these levels back to that homeostatic level, to that normal level where the body functions optimally and normally. So if we're spiking our blood sugar levels every time we have a snack and every time we have a meal, you have to remember insulin is being released in response to this to bring that blood sugar level back to its normal level. So we're getting these spikes, so this kind of you're climbing a mountain, so to speak. And then when the blood sugar level drops, with the insulin having done its job, that blood sugar level will then start to go back to normal and may even swing the other way. So you go down to a crash. And that can happen, particularly when you've chosen inappropriate sort of choices of carbs. So if you're doing a lot of refined carbohydrates, that is something that we do see in our clients when we're working with them from a nutritional perspective. And this can continue, these peaks and troughs can continue throughout the day, every time you're consuming something with carbohydrates in particular. And what we try to say to people is that we want to get you stabilized in your blood sugar levels throughout the day to prevent these kind of bursts and crashes. And how we do this is to incorporate healthy fats and protein into the diet, because the body digests these particular food groups, these macronutrients, in a different way to carbohydrates, and it essentially slows down digestion, and it allows the kind of blood sugar levels to be more stabilized, so we don't get these huge peaks and troughs going on. The problem when we get these peaks and troughs is that the body will start to become less sensitive to insulin. So what this means is that insulin binding to its receptors on the cells of fat and muscle, for example, can no longer communicate with these cells effectively to say, can you uptake this blood glucose that's coming into the body? So that communication system goes wrong. And now this is a problem, because what this means essentially is that excessive blood glucose is now floating around in the bloodstream, and that can lead to a whole host of problems, which I could talk another day about, which I won't do today, but we want to avoid this at all costs. We want to maintain insulin sensitivity, so that we want to make sure that insulin is able to communicate to our cells without this kind of resistance. We don't want this. We don't want this happening, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is really important shortly. So, on another show, I've spoken to Salma, who's a dietitian, and she works with the diabetic community, and she's spoken amazingly about diabetes and how diabetes is a growing problem in the UK as well as globally. And I was really worried when I heard her talk about how diabetes is now actually increasing in children. So this is a problem that we really do need to kind of get to grips with, especially in the South Asian community, where diabetes is actually on the increase, at an alarming rate. So if you think about insulin resistance, then if our body is not responding appropriately to these increases in blood sugar level, blood glucose, blood sugar levels, we're setting ourselves up for problems with diabetes and pre-diabetes. Yeah, so this is something that we need to avoid, given that we are seeing this increase. We can go back to our diet as one of the factors as to why this may be a particular problem. I'm going to take a small break. Maintaining, a good diet is going to help us to kind of avoid or prevent, and remember, prevention is always better than cure, getting ourselves into problems with diabetes and pre-diabetes. From Diabetes UK, cases of type 2 diabetes are increasing, and as I mentioned, it's a particular and growing health problem for people of South Asian descent. The likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes is reported to be as much as 6 times higher. That's 6 times higher in the South Asian population than in Europeans. And there are a number of factors, mostly linked to lifestyle. So that means that we have control over this. If we can educate ourselves, empower ourselves with the information that we need to keep our bodies in good state, nutritionally, from a lifestyle perspective. These are all believed to be behind this increased risk. South Asian people make up just 4% of the UK population, but account for an estimated 8% of all diagnosed cases of diabetes. Now, this is really worrying. This is something that we really need to take on board, and we need to address at an individual level, seeking the support of our healthcare providers. Remember, your GP is an amazing port of call for support in this if you're worried in any way. And then you've also got other team members like myself, a nutritional therapist, your dietitian. Working together with all these professionals will help you to reduce and eliminate, hopefully, your risk of developing pre-diabetes and diabetes if you can catch it early enough. If you are diabetic, you still have hope. There's much that you can do. There's so much information out there. I would always encourage you to do your own research and then take this with you to your GP and speak about your concerns. Have them addressed early on rather than wait till things start to get complicated. And do as much as you can for yourself and for your families and for those people that you can influence. So before I go into any more information on the benefits of fasting, I'm going to take a small break. So diabetes is also a risk factor for other chronic conditions such as cardiovascular disease. So it makes absolute sense to prevent this as much as possible, because not only do you end up with one problem, you set up the scene for ending up with more. It's a bit of a sort of a domino effect. So you want to try and get to the early stage of this problem to prevent yourselves spiraling out of control with multiple comorbidities, which we often see. I saw it a lot when I was working as a pharmacist, and unfortunately, there are people now with multiple complications, all because they didn't look after their diet and their lifestyle, as well as other factors. I mean, this is not the only reason, but there is a lot that can be done at this level, so that we can prevent disease as much as possible before getting to the complications. So it's easy to see how fasting can be an excellent tool when used appropriately and safely. I have more to share with you, so please stay tuned as we go for a short break now. You're listening to me, Shazia, on The Nutrition Show. Back with you shortly. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to The Nutrition Show. You're joining me, Shazia, on Unity FM 93.5 FM. We'll be diving more into the benefits of fasting shortly. Just a reminder that our discussion is for information purposes only and therefore does not constitute medical advice. For anyone listening with any health concern or worry, please do consult your own medical practitioner. So, what other benefits can there be to fasting? One of the reasons that some people may decide to fast, and as I mentioned before the break, was that they may be looking to support their cardiovascular or heart health. Fasting can and has been shown to improve factors such as blood pressure and cholesterol levels, both of which are risk factors for developing cardiovascular disease. Heart disease is considered to be the leading cause of death globally, accounting for about 31.5% of deaths. This is also the case for ethnic minority groups, so we're seeing the same trend in our South Asian population. Whilst we know from practice that modifying diet and lifestyle are amongst the most effective ways to reduce the risk of heart disease, there is research showing that incorporating fasting, where appropriate, into a routine may be particularly beneficial when it comes to cardiovascular disease management. For example, one review revealed alternate day fasting could reduce total cholesterol, amongst other factors, in people who were overweight, whereas another study showed significant reductions in blood pressure as well as LDL cholesterol. So this is the cholesterol that we hear about in the news and from our healthcare providers as the bad cholesterol. Of course, from a nutritional perspective, we look at the whole picture and we look at the various forms of cholesterol and what's actually happening to our cholesterol, because cholesterol in and of itself is essential in the body. It's used to make hormones. It's a fat substance that is used within our cell membranes. It coats our nerves, our neurons, so it's effective, for effective communication between neurons. So think about our brain, composed of fat. Think about the fat that lines our bodies, which we need for insulation. So fat in and of itself isn't the demon. It's what happens to the fat and how it kind of then portrays itself in terms of health risks and benefits that actually carries over into someone's health being positive or negative in what they actually experience from this cholesterol or from this fat substance going forward. So as a nutritional therapist, I would look at all the various components of cholesterol, but I would also look at how likely that cholesterol is becoming oxidized, because that's when it starts to become a problem. And the way we live our lives, as I mentioned, the stress levels that we're under, the lack of sleep that we, in the majority of cases, experience, the difficulties that we have in our relationships, the stress that we experience from our work, from, all sorts of things that are being thrown at us on a daily perspective. All of these things are causing inflammation in our body. And, it's a wonder then why we're suffering ill effects in terms of the good things that are in our body, because what we're doing then is damaging those. And that is what applies equally to our cholesterol. When we're causing all this oxidation in our body from the inflammation, from our way of life, the way we choose to live as well, when we can make changes, we are going to suffer ill consequences of poor health. So it's about looking at the big picture, looking at where we are, what our risk factors are, what we can actually do ourselves to modify our risk factors. So, blood pressure, what can we do to keep our blood pressure down? Think about stress management. Think about the foods that you eat. Are there foods that can, support you with bringing that blood pressure down? Are you someone who eats a lot of processed foods? Are you someone who maybe loves to add salt to everything? What kind of salt do you use? That can matter as well. Are you drinking enough fluids throughout the day? What are you actually doing from a diet perspective to bring your blood pressure to within normal ranges and accepted values? Stress is a huge factor. So, I'd love to talk about stress on a future show, but managing your stress is just absolutely essential. Whether you do that on your own or whether you seek out support, I would always advise to seek out support, especially when stress is becoming unbearable, because you're not alone. Stress is a huge problem, and you could be doing everything under the sun and be stressed out, and nothing will matter. Because stress will negate every good thing that you're doing. So I would always advise to look at where you are with your stress levels and incorporate methods and procedures in your life that you can use to manage stress, whether that's taking up a hobby, whether that's kind of speaking to a friend, whether that's kind of taking time out with a loved one, whether that's kind of utilising the apps that are available. So there's Headspace, there's Calm, whether that's utilising nutrients that can support you with stress. Obviously speaking to a nutritional therapist or a professional person first, particularly if you're on medication, because there can be interactions. I would certainly advise, look at all the ways that you can manage your stress levels to bring your blood pressure down. Equally, if you're looking for weight management support, that can also bring blood pressure down. So think about things that you can do that are free. Take a walk every day, find a nice green space where you are. If you're able to, a short walk, start slow, start small and build, but make it consistent and make it matter. And it's only going to matter when you make it consistent. If you're doing it once a week, it's not going to really do much for you. But if you start with once a week and build, make it a routine, you'll find that it will do incredible wonders for your health. So what else can fasting help us with? Well, it can help fight inflammation. So if we look at our daily lives again, stress is big, as I mentioned. We're all pretty much inflamed in some way or another. And inflammation, what do we actually kind of relate it to? So if you said to the average person, what do you see inflammation as? A very nice scenario that I use to help people understand is if you think of a child riding a bike and they fall off that bike and they graze their knee. So apart from the crying and the upset as a parent that you'll see and experience, there's a process that's going on, in the area of injury on that knee for that child. And it kind of sums up inflammation quite nicely. So, you'll see this, the bleeding and the kind of the insightful kind of view of that kind of injury. But what's actually happening is that the body is responding to that site of injury by recruiting cells to the area to start the repair process. So the child will experience heat in the area, swelling. Obviously the blood is going to be sort of leaving the body through the vasculature that's been damaged. There's going to be possibly pain as well, depending on the level of injury. So all these things are what you'd relate to inflammation. So you're probably thinking, and you've probably heard inflammation being a bad thing, but actually in the short term, inflammation is actually very beneficial. You can see that if there isn't any inflammation taking place in this scenario, healing won't take place. So we do need this to happen. So in acute situations, in the short term, inflammation is very helpful. It needs to happen, it needs to take place, but then it needs to clear up. We need to get the scab formed eventually, and then we need it to disappear over time and the scarring to kind of, fade away. That's kind of the ideal scenario. But what happens when a wound does not heal and you're getting this constant infiltration of cells, swelling, pain? When inflammation becomes chronic, this is when it becomes a problem. And this is what we're seeing many patients, many clients in the state of. It's a chronic state of inflammation where their body is just not coming to a state of resolve. And this is where fasting can be amazing because it helps support the body fight that chronic level of inflammation. How do we know fasting helps with inflammation? Well, studies that have been done have shown that the inflammatory markers that we can measure in blood are reduced by fasting. So we know that there's a positive effect of fasting on inflammatory conditions. And also people who are followed up over periods of time who have fasted also show benefits in reduced inflammation. And how do we know this from a sort of an external perspective? There are conditions that are sort of defined by an inflammatory basis. So examples include heart disease, as I've mentioned, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and many others. So when we see improvement in these conditions, we know that inflammation is being put into a better place, if you like. And, we're seeing improvements as a result of fasting in this way. So fasting can be an essential tool for those who are at risk of developing cardiovascular disease or have cardiovascular disease, but only under the supervision of a medical prescriber or a specialist who can support you and guide you and determine if whether or not you are actually a good candidate for fasting. So fasting can also be beneficial for brain function enhancement and neurological disorders. Now, for this particular benefit, I want to emphasize that studies were done in animals. So research is very much in its infancy. It's very much at its early stage. But it's useful because we can use this data, and with the with the hope of future studies, more detailed and more appropriate studies that can relate to human health, it gives us kind of hope for the future. And I'll discuss what kind of conditions this may be beneficial for in a moment. So what they found in one study in mice, intermittent fasting for 11 months improved both brain function and brain structure. So we're not just seeing external benefits, we're actually getting structural benefits as well. So things are going on inside of the body that are contributing to the positive effects that we're seeing from these studies. Other animal studies have reported fasting can protect brain health and increase the generation of nerve cells to enhance cognitive function. So what this means is that the actual thinking process, the kind of the higher level things that our brain does for us, like complex thinking, behavior, these are all enhanced by fasting. Again, you need to check to make sure that if you're in these groups of patients, that fasting is appropriate for you. But we're seeing this in animal studies, so it's kind of giving us hope for people who are at risk of developing neurodegenerative disorders, for them in particular, and to see how we can sort of, slow down, if not prevent them developing these conditions. There's no doubt that, some of the benefits in this arena are due to bringing down the inflammation that's going on in the brain. The brain has a lot of work to do day in, day out, keeping us going, keeping us functioning our best. So if it's constantly in a state of inflammation, it's understandable why these neurodegenerative disorders may be on the increase. Now, I have a family member with Alzheimer's, and it's absolutely heartbreaking to see how she has been affected by this condition and the progression that she's had in this disease condition over the time that I've known her. She was one of the most sharpest people I knew. I used to love having conversations with her, which I can't have now. And it's heartbreaking. I have to hold back tears when I go to visit her because it is so difficult to see. And I'm sure that, many people listening out there will have similar experiences, whether that's from family members, friends, or you may know someone who knows someone who has something similar. It can be really heartbreaking to see. And it's something that you wouldn't wish upon anyone. It's something that you'd want everyone to be protected from. So whilst these studies are being conducted in animals at this stage, we can see how they can be promising for research to come in the future to help those who are affected or at an increased risk of developing conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, which again is another very debilitating disease and very difficult to see in someone who has to live with this. So these are some of the potential benefits of fasting. There are many, many more. I've not really gone into them in any great depth or detail. I just wanted to touch on a few to give you the chance to read upon these for yourself and see if this is something that you can incorporate yourself in your day-to-day life. Post-Ramadan, Ramadan fasting I found to be so easy, and I believe it's because of the blessings of the month. I think we get very lazy, and I'm talking about myself first and foremost. I think it's something that we should try and carry on if we can, because it's a really effective tool in getting ourselves to optimal health. If you stayed with me to the end, I hope this has been insightful, and I hope it gets you looking into what fasting could do for you in supporting your health, in supporting your family's health, in supporting the health of those that you can influence. I would love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you've tried fasting and you're doing it already, so this is kind of just revision for you, and you're thinking, yeah, I've done it and I've been there and I know how it can help. I think it's something that everybody needs to look into and use if you can. Again, seek advice from your medical practitioner. If you are embarking on a journey of fasting, look for the one that will suit you best. Start small, start low, increase as your body gets used to the changes. Look into the values of fasting, what it's actually doing from a biochemical perspective. I was blown away when I was reading the research. Obviously, I didn't want to bring that to the show today because it's quite detailed and it's quite scientific. And, it doesn't serve purpose, because the purpose of the show is to kind of get you thinking about new ways to look into health, and from a way that you can understand and implement the change. I'm grateful for another opportunity to connect with you. Until next time, take care. Wassalamu alaikum.